Okay, officially can start. Hello, everyone. It's 7 p.m. right now in Japan. I'm super happy to welcome everyone to our today's online panel discussion about mental health in tech, especially for software developers. I'm very excited to welcome three amazing speakers who will be sharing their insights, tips, and opinions today. So we have Anne today, who is a director of Women Who Code Tokyo. We have Juan, who is a co-founder, VP of engineering at the Crossborders Innovation. And also we have Max, who is a founder of Yudemon and Time Off. And before we move on to the most juiciest part of today's event, the panel discussion, I would also like to remind everyone the rules. We try to make our events safe and comfortable for everyone. So please be polite and respectful to speakers, to our speakers, to the rest of the audience. I strongly encourage everyone to write down questions and the feedback in the chat. If you write the questions, yes, please be very respectful. If you want to address your question to a certain speaker, please write down the name. If you just want to address a question to anyone, just write down to all or maybe to anyone who wants to answer. Cool. And so next part will be probably short self-introductions. If you don't mind, our respected speakers, please introduce yourself shortly. I don't have a specific order. I just have people in my screen right now, and let's start from the left side. Juan, you're the first in the left side. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Reyes. I am a computer engineer from Dominican Republic. I came to Japan around 6 years ago. And I founded my company, Crossborders Innovations, about 4 years ago, trying to provide solutions for staffing and recruiting agencies, trying to find ways to help Japan modernize their recruiting service and systems. I have a lot of experience basically in the whole stack. I've worked with small mobile applications. I've worked with big APIs and solutions that have millions of users. And also I've worked with small teams and big teams with a lot of people from all over the world. And one of the things that I really am passionate about is team building, working with helping people develop, become the better version of themselves, and also the impact that the current industry has on people's mental health. So yeah, that's basically why I was invited here.
Thank you so much, Juan. Max, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Max. I originally started my career in quantum physics, but after my PhD, I decided I want to do something more applied, and I got some exposure to the startup scene during my PhD already. So I came to Japan and joined a startup as an AI researcher, and kind of was leading sort of between the research and the product development. That was sort of the position I found for myself. But a few years into my startup experience, I realized that never in my life had I felt both more busy and at the same time less productive. That's kind of when I realized for myself, wait, something's broken, something's not working with the way startups are run. Our current culture is kind of this engineering culture is usually working. And that got me thinking and writing about the topic of the value of time off, the value of rest, all these different aspects, and also the value of culture. And eventually I published a book 2 years ago called Time Off, which became an international bestseller, on the importance of time off and the value of what we call a rest ethic. So everyone knows a work ethic, but we believe that you also need a rest ethic to complement that. And since then, I've been talking about the book, sharing these ideas, but also consulting and working with companies like Deloitte, Twitter, GitLab, some companies like that, helping them build their rest ethic internally and helping individuals build their rest ethic. I'm still also working as a developer myself, and I started a new company recently called Yudemon, where I'm combining my background in AI and also my background in music to help people with breathing exercises, mental health, and these different things. So kind of performance optimization through biometric data using AI generated music. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm doing right now.
Thank you so much, Max. Anne?
Hi, my name's Anne Kilzer. I'm a software engineer at Mercari and at the US at Tokyo side. I am a director at Women Who Code. I wanted to share because the importance of mental health, something that I deal with day to day, and thought I could, I've tried to build a list of resources to help my friends and community. Just as a disclaimer, the opinions and things I'm sharing tonight are not gossip or about any of place I currently work, and they're not the opinions of my employers, but I really wanted to, do what I can to kind of normalize this type of discussion. And thanks again, Sasha, for facilitating this, because it's really important to destigmatize and talk about these things. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, amazing speakers, for self-intro. We have so many interesting backgrounds, and definitely this is something that we're gonna talk later. Yeah, we have people in the chat already sending some questions, sending some feedbacks. Speakers, do you actually have access to the chat? Can you see what people are writing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good, so probably time for us to start our discussion. We start probably the most general topic and then gradually move to the more, I would say, concrete points that are described in our agenda. So, when I was preparing for this event, I was sending this event to different communities. I actually came across several opinions about mental health in tech not being such a problem compared to other industries. And so people basically think that, the software engineers usually are considered to have a good salary and maybe comfortable environment to work with, but still the problem of the mental health is important. And why do we need to talk about it today? And why do we need to talk about the problem of the mental health in tech, right? And yeah, so this is mainly about the generally, why do you think this issue is so important to talk about today? Why this issue is so overlooked? Yeah, so this question is addressed to all our speakers, and if someone would like to answer it first, can go ahead.
Sure. Well, I feel that the generalization of the idea that, well, you earn a lot of money, so you probably are okay. It should be already something that, like, it's already turning heads. It is well understood that work life is more important, that the amount of liberty and benefit that you can get from getting a fat paycheck. And I think that people have to understand that the amount of responsibilities that usually fall on the shoulders of people who have to build extremely complex systems and have to work with so many different variables and a lot of different things that can go wrong, really can take a toll on your mental health. And the way the industry itself, the mechanisms and the methodologies that have been developed to be able to optimize the output of engineers, of people that have to be producing constantly because the market is constantly demanding, has stretched us thin, has stretched our mental health to the point of breaking point. I wouldn't dare to say that we are the most stressed part of the workforce, but we definitely are not in a great position in terms of the amount of work that we have to deal with, the amount of responsibilities, the relationship that we have with our managers, the expectations that are on our shoulders are really, really high. So it doesn't really matter if you have a lot of money in your bank if if you're going insane. So if you can't think about anything good in your life. So I think we should definitely completely dismiss that kind of thinking and focus on the fact that there has to be a better way, that there has to be more focus on the work-life balance that can allow a person to not just live constantly stressed because of some sort of output or metric that was set up arbitrarily, but because people deserve to, be okay.
I totally agree. We should not associate having enough resources of whatever kind with mental health necessarily. I think there's also an important distinction. There's genuine exhaustion, which is really someone who's, I don't know, a single mother working 3 jobs just to support their family. That's a very different kind of mental stress than someone being in an unfulfilling position with a lot of demands, a lot of pressures. It's not that one of them is worse than the other, but they're very, very different demands. And I think that should also be taken into account. And I think also as people in tech, we have a tendency to really associate ourselves with our work, maybe more so than in certain other areas. We see our value, we define our value in a way through what we're doing, and we feel really we impersonate the things we're building if we really believe in them. So this also puts a very unique kind of stress on us in many cases, and it makes it much harder for us to set boundaries. And actually, just on the flip side of all of this, I think there's another reason why mental health is so important to be discussed within the tech community. And that's actually that we, as the tech community, is responsible for building a lot of the technology, a lot of the things that people interact with, and that actually drives some of these issues that we are seeing. So there's one thing, we should take care of ourselves in that respect, but we should also be very aware of what we put out there in the world and how we facilitate this in other people.
Yeah, I'd also like to add and definitely echo Max's point about, defining your self-worth through work. That's something I can personally relate to. I think the prompt, of saying, well, other people have it worse. I mean, look, I'm not public with my situation and I'm not going to out myself tonight, but statements like other people have it worse are the type of comments they need. There is a certain mindset where it's like oppression Olympics and we need to have some zero sum, like who suffered more. It doesn't matter. The thing is, if you're suffering, maybe you don't have to, and maybe you can get help and you can inspire other people to get help. We do have immense privilege. Well, I should clarify too, English speaking devs in America, Europe, and places are paid in the United States really high. Many people in Japan are paid really high. Some are not. If you're an early career, or maybe you just didn't get in the right place, you can still have less access to resources. But if you are in a more, saying you're making a high salary, that gives you access to spend money on therapy, which is great, but there's still so much stigma and shame in it that it's hard for people to seek help in the first place. And then another point I will say, just having been in a PhD program, man, that's a fun place to find mental health. That's just like a pressure cooker for mental health issues because, again, low salary, 60-hour weeks, all this stress and pressure. So I say, you know what, if you can make things better for yourself, then maybe you can inspire other people and help lift up other people in the community too. So there's nothing wrong with putting your own mask on first.
Thank
Actually,
you so
just
much.
maybe one point to add to the stigma aspect, because I think it's so important and so overlooked as well. People think of mental health as a binary thing. You're either mentally healthy or you're mentally sick. But even if you don't suffer from clinical depression, from panic attacks, whatever it might be to be defined or labeled as mentally ill, it's a huge continuum, and not being mentally ill does not mean you're mentally healthy. So we should treat that as a spectrum, and absolutely everyone on that spectrum can benefit from improving their mental health and can benefit from taking it seriously. So I think one thing it's not going to get rid of the stigma, but just accepting that there's more than just two different states in there is really an important step to get us along with this discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. This is so true. This is actually very eye-opening what you are saying right now. And we have a lot of key points in our agenda to discuss, because before the event, I have talked to our speakers and they mentioned to me several key points that they would like to highlight. And I already have several questions in the chat. People are just diving straight to the point. Yes, we have imposter syndrome as a first point in our agenda, and we would probably like to start from discussing what is the imposter syndrome, whom does it strike? Does it strike only successful people? Does it strike only first-time developers? And how to deal with imposter syndrome, if there is any way to deal with that? Maybe you would like to ask. Yeah.
Sure. Well, to define imposter syndrome, basically imposter syndrome is the mismatch between who you think you are and who you think you have to be to achieve the things that you are either currently doing or you want to do. So imposter syndrome in itself is it's an issue of identity, where you feel, you doubt that you are capable of doing the things that you are doing, and you feel like you're fake, like you're tricking people into believing that what you're doing is correct or is the right thing, and you feel like you either have to work harder than anybody else to be able to hide the fact that you are an imposter, or you either try to cope with it by either trying to ignore it, being paralyzed, or procrastination, or you develop some sort of perfectionism where you're obsessed with getting things done immediately and to an extremely high level, or you develop some sort of people-pleasing kind of behavior where you're trying to coerce the other person in some way to kind of ignore the fact that you're not developing, or you're not doing what you want. So in a way, as you mentioned, imposter syndrome, it is known, or people believe that, okay, it's something that only affects highly successful people, and they feel like, oh, they don't deserve what they have because they feel like frauds, or like, let's say, for example, a pretty successful basketball player may feel like, oh, I don't deserve to be a professional because I just happen to have some sort of success or luck, and I just barely scrape by. But in reality, there's a lot of different degrees of imposter syndrome, and a lot of people, regardless of where they are, in what aspect, in what moment of their career they can feel like frauds, and it can definitely affect your life tremendously. So yeah, that's basically what imposter syndrome is. There's a lot more to unpack on there if you want me to elaborate on that.
Yeah, people here want answers. How to
Okay.
I think
So
there's
I see that there are some people asking how to deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Most people are probably concerned with, like, okay, how do I get rid of it? How do I deal with it? And let me just tell you right now that it's good that you are you're interested in getting rid of it, because I strongly believe that people should not just deal with it. People should strive to get make themselves free of imposter syndrome. But it's not like a secret. It's not something that you can do with, you just read the right paragraph and it's like, oh my God, I understand that everything now, and I feel great about myself. It takes a lot of work, just like any neurosis. It's something that you learn to do through a lot of years, and it's something that you have to unlearn through a lot of years of work. And it definitely has to do a lot with who you feel you are. A lot of the problems with imposter syndrome, when imposter syndrome shows up, it's usually when you start asking yourself, who am I to blank? Why do I think that I can blank? And all that is basically you feeling like your identity is being challenged because you don't feel like you're enough. And it is a very, very hot issue in the area of engineering, because it is perceived as a career of high, like you have to have a lot of knowledge to be able to perform in there. So there's a lot of expectations, and there's a skew view of what you perceive your skills are compared to your peers or your superiors. You might feel like you cannot compare to other people. You cannot perform at the same level because in a way our brains are really bad at measuring, assessing properly our capacities compared to other people. Just like social media, when you see other people and you see just the best of other people's lives, with the best pictures, the filtered pictures, the filter of life, you get the same experience in the workspace. So we kind of developed that idea where other people are better than us, and we must be just lucky to be here. So we must work extremely hard, or try to avoid work, or try to lie or deceive or something to be able to survive. And like any identity issue, it triggers your survival responses. It makes you stressed. It makes you irritated. It can affect your performance, because when your brain is constantly in stress, even if it's a low, like just like background noise, a constant level of stress, your body starts activating the body starts activating the systems that are supposed to keep you alive, and those systems start taking blood flow out of your unnecessary unnecessary parts of your body. For example, like the prefrontal cortex in your brain, that is where you can actually think clearly, resonate, and be creative. And all the blood goes into the more primal areas that allow you to just like either fight or flight. You can't digest properly because the blood is taken away from there. You're constantly, you feel like your mind is foggy. You can't really concentrate very well, and it's hard to reason. And that kind of situation then kind of perpetuates the situation of feeling like a fake, because you're stressed, you can't perform, therefore you see other people doing better, therefore you feel more like a fake. making you feel worse, making you feel more stressed, and so on and on and on. And it's a terrible trap to live in. And so it's definitely something that needs to be acknowledged and worked to be able to free yourself out of it.
Thank you, Juan. And Max, do you have any opinion on the imposter syndrome?
Go ahead.
I have three, I guess. Well, maybe my first point is it's never going to be gone entirely. Like, I'm 10 years into my industry career. I have been coding for 20 years because I did it in high school and college and grad school. I've been doing this forever. Even this week, sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm not who I want myself to be. You know, those thoughts are going to pop up, but it's more how you respond to it. So there's three kind of ways I'd say I'm dealing with it. First one is kind of a joke response, but if you do security penetration testing, the whole point of the job is to fake being something, fake getting access. It is impossible mathematically. If you have convinced people you're a penetration tester, whether you're legit or not, you have social engineered your way to something. Good job. So second one, real answer, you need to find some ways to define your self-worth outside of work. Like, the thing is, okay, maybe you convinced yourself that you're not an imposter now, but your career ladder, it just keeps going up. There's always another achievement. There's always another thing. And so you get in this cycle where you, yeah, I got the goal, I did well, but then the next quarter you're in the same cycle. So find some of your self-worth outside of your work. We are people, we don't just exist to scale capitalism. So we, you know, like, you have inherent worth and you deserve to have a job and to have a place to belong. The other thing is, try not to compare yourself to other people because everyone's going to have a different journey. Just compare to yourself to who you were, you know, what are you doing that you weren't doing a year ago? Because we can all make progress there. And yeah, maybe all I did was rest in the pandemic, or a person hypothetically, but still, like, give yourself compassion. And yeah, those would be my main points.
Yeah, I fully agree with absolutely everything that the two of you just said. And I actually want to pick up on some of those points. First of all, Anne, I totally agree. I've also struggled with imposter syndrome my entire career, sometimes more, sometimes less. Especially after big achievements, like once the book got published, I was suddenly talking to a lot of people on the topic. Everyone thought I was suddenly an expert on rest. And oh my God, if I have any problem with my own rest ethic, if I struggle with stress, I'm doing everything wrong. I'm fake, I'm a liar. What am I doing? But then actually more importantly, and maybe also more practically, I want to pick up a point from Juan. So this whole physical aspect of things actually, and this might take us in a slightly different direction, but I think it's really important. A lot of times when we try to address mental health, we try to do it through the mind. Talk therapy, for example, addresses the mind directly, but the mind-body connection is extremely strong and it goes in both directions. It also goes from the body up to the mind. So Juan, you outlined a few things, like you feel stressed, you kind of heart starts racing, you get sweaty, these sort of things. So that's maybe from the mind to the body, but you can actually use the reverse process to through the body to the mind. And our autonomic nervous system, so this whole thing that's happening without our control, it's split into two parts: the sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, the rest and digest side. So many of us are overstimulated on the sympathetic side. We're constantly in this fight or flight response, and we can never switch completely off. I mean, I'm working on this now professionally, so I might be a bit biased, but this is extremely powerful. If we can access the autonomic nervous system through our body, then we can also access our mind and actually help these things in a much better way in some instances than we can with addressing the mind through the mind. I personally, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was probably when I had my kind of lowest point. I'm very fortunate that I never struggled with like serious depression or anything. But at that point, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had genuine anxiety. And I've been meditating for a long time on and off, but I never really got it to stick. And I always felt like after, I don't know, 3 months, yeah, it's kind of helping, but I'm not really sure. What I got into at that point then, or what I found, was what's called heart rate variability biofeedback training. And I can really recommend that to people. So HRV biofeedback training. Essentially, you're wearing a heart rate monitor and you're going through specific breathing exercises, and you're watching your heart rate in real time as you actually influencing it through your breath, and you directly access, and you can see just through consciously breathing, you can control your body, your heart rate, and through that also the mind. And I think for me, as an engineer, as someone who's very data driven, this really spoke to me because I could see in real time how my body was responding, and I could track my changes over time. So if you're anything like me, and I think in this community, there are a lot of people like this who enjoy this data-driven aspect of it, I can really recommend heart rate variability biofeedback training. And it then helps you get the balance between the sympathetic side and the parasympathetic side. And a lot of these other things, and again, I completely agree, it's never going to go away, the imposter syndrome or something, but you're managing those symptoms much better. So you're building more self-resilience, essentially, ability to self-regulate. And you're never going to get rid of it, but you can start to live more and more with it, and especially kind of perform better under stresses and recognize those stresses and do something about them before they become a real issue.
Yeah, I want to add a few things. Sorry that I don't want to dwell too much into one point and not give enough time for anything else, but I think it's really important. First, I actually disagree with the fact that I think you can get to a point, I don't think in absolutes, but you can get to a point where you can feel free from the shackles of imposter syndrome. Get to a point where it's not so much something that you live with, but something that you're above of, and it no longer holds any kind of power over you. And I can definitely tell that I have made a lot of strides in the last few years. As you said, you cannot free yourself from anything completely, especially things from the mind. But there is definitely, if you do the work, and there's a lot of evidence, a lot of studies done on this that can really give you the power to not have to live on, as you said, live at the mercy of the sympathetic nervous system, and always feel flooded with cortisol and stress, and not being able to perform at your best. There are definitely a lot of ways, a lot of exercises, and a lot of work that you can do to be able to not have to live with imposter syndrome. And there's another question. There's another point that I wanted to make. There is someone who said that one thing that can help with this imposter syndrome is to seek regular feedback from managers and peers. There's a problem with that because your reticular activating system in your brain, the system that basically regulates your attention, the things that can actually get to your conscious mind, because without it, you will be overwhelmed with the amount of information that gets to your brain. People with imposter syndrome have a deregulated reticular activating system, and any kind of feedback that you receive will be filtered. So you have literally taught your brain to ignore any kind of positive and alert to any negative feedback. And that's kind of the biggest issue with people who suffer with imposter syndrome. You can hear 100 praises, but you just hear one negative thing, one but, and that takes everything away. So as nice as it will be to have constantly people praising you, that's not going to help you get rid of your imposter syndrome or alleviate the situation. What you can do, as Anne mentioned, is recognize that imposter syndrome it's something that you do. It's not who you are, and there are things that you can do to place your self-worth based on things that you can control, not on other people or other things that are outside of you. And also, as Max said, there are exercises, breathing exercises. There are ways to control the anxiety attacks and all that kind of stuff that comes with imposter syndrome that you can do. But eventually you're going to have to do the work of understanding why these things are happening. What is triggering your stress? What are the patterns? And then doing the work to be able to deal with that.
Thank you so much, everyone. Maybe Juan, Max, if you could maybe share, are there any resources or books where maybe our audience can read about the physical way of regulating, of dealing with imposter syndrome? Is there any resources that you recommend people to look into?
Well, there's a book written by Claire Hoza, I think is her name, called Breaking Imposter Syndrome, I believe is the name of the book. That book helped me a lot. There's a lot of other work done by Norman Deutsch about how neuroplasticity and the fact that your brain is plastic, it can change itself. I think his book was called The Brain That Can Change Itself. Regarding the exercises, there's a lot of information online. The main gist of it is when your breathing patterns can, as Max said, affect your heart rate, which eventually affects everything else, your blood flow and everything. If you breathe, if you inhale and then exhale, make your exhales longer than your inhales, your heart rate tends to lower. If you inhale for longer than you exhale, your heart rate tends to go higher. That's usually what people do when they're going to do like some sort of sports or sprint. They do this kind of like 2 ins and then 1 out. And that's a long in. And that usually accelerates your heart rate and makes you really alert. But if you do 1 long out, that usually calms you down. And if you close your eyes and do that, usually your mind tends to clear and you feel more relaxed on that. Those are my 2 cents.
I would have a lot to say about this because it's literally what I'm working on professionally right now, a tool for this heart rate variability biofeedback training. A few book recommendations. One, I've just happened to have it in front of me. It's Biofeedback and Mindfulness in Everyday Life by Inaka-san. It's a really great book. None of the resources I'm recommending are specifically for imposter syndrome, but I think a lot of these tools help with managing the symptoms of all these different mental health related things. And I can also put an article in the chat in a moment where I describe how I myself actually, when I had this anxiety, used this technique to do the heart rate variability biofeedback training. And just to the breathing exercise, one specific one, so I'd actually go a bit more precise than it varies from person to person. So to get the ideal protocol, you have to measure yourself, but on average, around 6 breaths per minute is where you get the optimal results for most of the people. So that's roughly a 4-second inhale and a 6-second exhale. That's where you get the strongest heart rate oscillations. And that's what really trains your autonomic nervous system. So it is genuinely training your heart and your autonomic nervous system to be able to switch between those different states. And that happens around that 6 breaths per minute breathing rate. I'll put another link in the chat with some more details before I go on about this for another half hour.
Thank you. I think that I should have made a whole event about the imposter syndrome. Actually, this is so much to discuss, but we actually have a few other points, the key points in our agenda. And one of the points is setting a healthy boundaries with work. and with your coworkers. And maybe this is something that I would like to ask Anne, as she mentioned to me before that she would like to highlight the setting healthy boundaries with coworkers is an important part of the working process. And
yeah, I think this one is challenging because a lot of modern, work environments invite us to kind of blur boundaries more. We get incredible trust and freedom to, I used to intern at Google, and there's like a literal ball pit in Mountain View, and there's people playing Frisbee, and people decide to date coworkers, or, there's just things that change versus sort of the traditional workspace. And while on the bright side, this allows us to be more our authentic selves, I think sometimes in my career, I've looked at places where, I could have set better boundaries with people. I could have, you decide if this person's going to be your friend or your coworker or both. And I just learned a really good lesson recently watching, I forget the speaker's name, but it was one of the LinkedIn trainings on managing emotions at work. And one of the key points was, say you want to share some information with a coworker, it's kind of important to decide, hey, am I sharing this to let, this person know that their work might, her example was, I want to share something to let you know that I'm not able to be here fully present because I'm dealing with an emotional issue. But you don't actually need to explain or justify what it is. You can just say, I can't be here fully today. I'm dealing with something. I will do my best. But maybe I'm grieving. But you don't have to go into detail what you're grieving. But the difference is if you are sharing something because you need your coworker to validate you, or you need your coworker to affirm or something, you might be blurring boundaries there. So I think it's a good thing that I've been looking at personally, and like, how do I, because everyone, regardless of your mental health status, you're going to feel emotions. You're going to have things that arise at work. And emotions doesn't mean just the negative emotions. It can mean any kind of emotion. But, one of the things is when I feel frustration or I feel stress, what I'm trying to do now in my own journey as an engineer is just do a little, I started a career journal, actually. I use Notion, and I just sort of type those feelings. I do it like 20 minutes in the morning, and I just get out those feelings before I take it to somewhere else. And I'm more conscious about how I sort of process these things. And I'm really working, especially in Japan, if you first come here, it can be very isolating. So while I think it's important and it's okay to have friendships at work, sometimes knowing that it might be good to be a little guarded in places and make sure you have a good friend network outside. When I first came to Japan, all my friends were my coworkers, and I leaned into some of those work relationships too much as a friend. And, I can see it made things more complicated, but, maybe they were hard lessons to learn. I'm grateful I'm working forward on them. But I'd love to hear what some of the other panelists think, like if you've had on setting good boundaries. Thanks.
I mostly agree with this point. I think it's very challenging. It also very much depends on kind of what stage in a company, or if you're much more early stage, the founder, it's really hard to build those boundaries. Even if you want to, it's almost impossible. Whereas if it's much more later stage, kind of in a big company, it's probably much easier and also more advisable. But I think in general, I totally agree with everything, but maybe boundaries in different ways. Also boundaries between everyday life, or kind of this work-life balance. I don't really like the term, but I don't have a better alternative for it. And again, it comes back to this idea of a work ethic and a rest ethic. So you need to have a rest ethic, and it actually needs to be something conscious. Rest doesn't just happen when you're not working. It doesn't just suddenly appear in the white spaces in your calendar. You need to actively make it, and you need to set those boundaries and then treat it just like you would treat a work meeting. And I think we've all realized over the last 2 years or so that this is even more important, because so many of us are working from home. Boundaries have even more disappeared. So we need to be conscious of setting those boundaries between the different things, and really consciously make those decisions. I think that kind of, it's different form of boundaries, but I think it's just as important.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Max's point that I guess the difference between being like the first engineer at a startup versus the I don't know, n hundredth, person at Mercari is like it's also set, it's a different start. And part of the fun of a startup is that closeness, and you code and then maybe you go have a meal together, but it is harder to get space, and it is important to really have some people, whether it's a network, a mentor or a friend or a therapist, or maybe you can talk with your family, have someone outside of that dynamic that you can talk to with your problems, but really try to avoid gossip or rumors or negativity in that workspace, because it can become an unhealthy dynamic. Yeah.
Actually, just one more thought, which kind of touches on that as well a little bit, I think, or the relationship to your coworkers. I think also communication boundaries are extremely important and very badly managed in a lot of tech companies, especially when it comes to Slack and related things. I think that's a really easy thing for people to set their own boundaries and set their expectations within their teams as well. It works at an individual level, but even more if you're a manager, if you're managing a team, I really recommend thinking about the communication styles that you're using and allowing people to set their own boundaries and encouraging them to do that and enabling them to do that.
Thank you, Juan. Would you like to add something else?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with all the arguments and points that Anne and Max shared. I feel that if there's anything that I could add, it would be that sometimes it can be very difficult to set boundaries when you feel like your boundaries are not worth anything. And that's something that is very common for people who have very low self-worth. They tend to feel like other people's needs are more important than theirs. So it's very difficult for a person who's struggling with, as I said, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, or any kind of neurosis that affects your self-worth to feel capable of setting boundaries, because you don't feel like your time is worth anything, or your energy is worth anything. So if you're struggling to set boundaries, probably be aware that this is one of the reasons, and you should definitely do the work to build your self-worth, to anchor your self-worth on something that it's solid and real, and then you can more easily set your boundaries, which is something really, really important.
May I add a point too? The word boundaries sometimes has a negative connotation, like I'm putting a wall between you and me or something, or like I'm hiding. But it's really, if you think about it, it's a structure of how we create relationships with people. Like obviously you share different things with your intimate partner than you do with your parents, than you do with a random person on the street. And the ability to set those differences allows us to really kind of give like a good face and treasure those different relationships. And those, it's almost in a way like the way it's information flow in a sense. So don't forget that you're not punishing someone by setting a boundary. It's actually a respectful thing to do, and it creates healthier friendships and connections.
Do you think it became easier or difficult, especially this pandemic times when everyone is working remote right now? Is it easier to set boundaries with coworkers right now, since all the communication is done through Slacks or tools like that?
I think in general, it's become more difficult. And the problem is that a lot of people, and I think it's especially leadership and management responsibility, but also individuals, a lot of people have just tried to take the office experience and copy it one-to-one into the remote setting, trying this weird hybrid approach, which just doesn't work. There are a few companies out there who really built the remote experience from the ground up. And I think in that case, it can work better potentially in a remote setting. I'm not sure if it's better or worse, but at least it can be done very well. But I think in a lot of cases, the problem is that we've tried to copy the office experience to the remote world, and that's just not working. Even people trying these sort of like things before a meeting, this kind of casual get together thing, it just doesn't work online. And there's so many examples like that. I can really recommend, if you're interested in this topic of remote versus in-office, GitLab, the company, they've done an amazing job. They were remote only before the pandemic. They have an amazing head of remote, so someone who's only focusing on how to make a company work remotely, Darren Murph. He's amazing, and they have very extensive documentation online. Actually, also a lot about employee mental health. So GitLab, I highly recommend their resources.
I would say in my situation, I am incredibly lucky and privileged that my employer, Macari, right now has, allowed certain things that give me the ability to set boundaries, but I want to recognize that a lot of people don't have that. I would say key things that they let me do. They let me be camera off in meetings if I'm feeling tired. And there's actually some research that shows that camera on is especially fatiguing for women or femmes or anyone who has social pressure to keep up appearances. I mean, there's literally filters that will correct the blemishes on your skin. And I don't know how many of the panelists put on powder before this talk, but for me, I can kind of get away with things because I'm a privileged engineer, but I know there are women that are expected to put on makeup and be smiling on camera. So that can be fatiguing. I think another aspect is I'm able to just shut my laptop and not answer emails, but I know that some people in the world have reported that their workload has gone up because their employer's like, well, now that you're not commuting, you can now work 12 hours instead of 10. And so, yeah, I would say if you're in a position where you're more senior and you have power, teach your coworkers and employees. I did have one coworker DMing me on my Gmail account after hours, and I said, hey, you got to go through work. I am away it's Friday night, it's 8 p.m. I can't do that. So if you have that privilege, you can be an advocate for others and remind your peers to follow working hours and respect schedules.
Right.
Thank you. Maybe also moving to the question that gradually smoothly is the question of rest, right? We're talking a lot about work and what is the right way to rest. And I know that Max has written a book about it, and maybe Max can tell us what does he think about the rest ethic.
Sure, for the sake of time, I'll try and keep it very short. But what a lot of people get wrong is thinking that rest is just lying on the couch, being distracted, watching Netflix, I don't know, scrolling down on Instagram. But counterintuitively, good rest is actually very active. It's engaging often in something else that's deeply meaningful to you. And it's getting this detachment from work or from whatever is causing you the main stress. If you're just going into this distracted mode, you're not actually getting this detachment. So Aristotle had this complete separation. For him, rest always asks the question, rest for what? And the answer is usually more work. So that's not the rest we're actually aiming for. What we want is leisure, which is really defined through meaning, through the energy it gives you. So in a short way, I'd ask you to look at your rest and ask, is it rest that's meaningful in itself and that energizes you? And what that is can look very, very different for everyone, and everyone has to define and create and work on their own rest ethic. But yeah, in a lot of cases, these things are very, very active. And one thing I really like to talk to people in the tech community, in the knowledge worker community, it's not an either or. It's not a kind of rest versus work. They're not mutually exclusive, but they feed into each other. Kind of rest ethic and work ethic are like exhale and inhale. Like the work ethic is like the inhale, but you can only inhale for so long. A lot of us are trying to constantly inhale, and that's what leads us to this burnout issue that we're now seeing and all the other related things. They really support and supplement each other, rest and work. And if you want to get good things done, if you want to do great things, if you want to be creative and innovative, rest is a key part of that equation. If you look at the creative process, it can be broken down into 4 steps: preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Preparation, you actually need to sit down and do the hard work, understand the problem, really work through everything. But then comes this incubation phase, and that can only happen from a neurological perspective if you actually step away from the problem. So those big breakthroughs come to you when you're not consciously engaged in that particular problem. So if you look at this creative process, only half of it is active work. The other half is rest. It is stepping away. It is time off. So if you want to get great things done, you need to invest in your rest ethic. I think that's the key message really that we want to tell with our book. It's not about being lazy, taking time off. If anything, it's the opposite. And also, we as a tech community, we're building automation technologies, we're building AI technologies, we're building tools that can take over our busy work. So what's going to be left for us is the empathetic side, is the creative side. And all of these things, which will be the most valuable things in the future of work, really crucially depend on our ability to rest effectively. So that's kind of my short condensed version of that.
Thank you. And Juan, any opinions on how rest is important for you in your, for example, daily lives?
Well, I think that rest is extremely important for not just the work that we do to be able to, perform at a degree that can allow us to be successful, but also to have the ability to enjoy life properly. There's no denial that if you are in some sort of level of stress that follows you as if it was like some sort of white noise throughout your life, you're in the office and you feel stressed, you come home and you still feel stressed, you go on a trip and you still feel stressed, there's never going to be true rest. And a lot of it has to do with how you've learned to perform, to carry yourself through your professional life, how you've learned to cope with the challenges that life throws at you, but also you need to be able to do the work to learn, as Max said, how is it that you can optimize, or you can really take advantage of the few moments that life gives you to be able to rest. Because of course we have responsibilities, we have to be able to carry on with the work that we have to do to be able to be successful. We all want to be successful in that regard, but it is an active work. We have to learn how to rest. We have to do the rest. All that is active work. We can't just expect to be anointed by it, or some sort of like just osmosis, kind of just get it. We have to be very self-aware. We have to read. We have to figure out all these issues, understand ourselves enough to be able to get to a point, as I said, to live a and be better be better professionals, and be better be better with ourselves.
Thank you. And I think you have been muted before. And now, yes,
having trouble with my mute button. I think Max and Juan raised great points. I'd like to talk a little bit about I think they were talking more like long-term rest. And I also think there's a different granularity of just within your workday and the rhythm of your day, you know, giving yourself time, if you're able to stand up and stretch, you know, taking breaks throughout the day. And I always knew intuitively that sometimes, I guess because I was a PhD student and I knew that sometimes you'd have your ideas when you step away, but it's really cool to hear there's a whole process to finding that. So that's so awesome. But so I guess another thing I just discovered recently as sort of this little clock is like such a lifesaver for me, because I get to do sort of like Pomodoro, but Pomodoro is way too strict for me. So I like that I can set it and then I'm going to just try to focus on something for 20 minutes. And then I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break. And I just try to do this throughout the day. You know, there's a lot of really great techniques out there. A lot of people talking about attention, whether it's a formal ADHD diagnosis, or you just feel like your attention is scarce because of the stress of the pandemic. There are different tools and, you know, like that you can do, and you can adapt things to work for yourself. But yeah, I would say just give yourself time and breaks during the day. We're not machines. So thanks.
That's such an important point you raise, actually. And I even say the short times, the short breaks are more important to learn than the big ones, because if you don't know to appreciate those short moments, often the longer breaks will actually leave you even more empty and dissatisfied. And once you come back to it, you feel even more troubled in a way. So if your only kind of picture of time off, of rest, is this big 1 week adventure holiday or something, chances are you're going to have a great time and you come back and you feel even worse than you did before. So I completely agree. Start from the small moments, build these little pockets of rest, of time off into your everyday life, and start to enjoy them, and then work your way up from there.
Thank you. I just shared a link to Mark's book,
Thank you.
Time Off, in the chat. So if you're interested, it's available on Amazon. And Anne also shared the link to the clock.
Not a sponsored partnership, but it's like very friendly for people with ADHD or dyslexia. You know, you see this like very visible wedge. So again, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. Sometimes these things, even if they're not designed for our specific case, they're just easier. You can see from across the room how much time you have left, and it makes a sound. If you like, you can turn that off. But it has made my start of my year a lot better. So I hope it can help.
Can I also share in the chat the list of the resources for the mental well-being that you shared with me earlier?
Oh yeah. I've been building this list in Notion, and it's a mix of free and paid things and online tools that I've shared. So yeah, please share that.
Yeah, I just shared in the chat. And also I get a message from Max, one of the attendees, who would like to share his recipe for dealing with burnout.
Oh, sorry, did I send those messages to?
Yeah, take care of yourself first. Healthy eating, avoid mood-altering drugs and alcohol, balance sleep, and exercise. Yeah. Cool. And yeah, so we have been talking about rest, how rest is important. So I think that it's important to let our speakers go rest today, because it was
one thing that I wanted to say before we close real quick. I don't want Shantae's question to be ignored. She asked, or he or she, sorry about that. How do you escape perfectionism when a job may want you to have extreme attention to detail skills? I would say really briefly that perfectionism is a coping mechanism. So if your company, if your manager is trying to demand high standards on you, that just have high standards. So if you have problems with meeting those standards, then you can negotiate and try to then you know that's a problem that you have to deal with. But if you're setting those standards yourself, then that's another thing entirely, and it's an issue that you have to address accordingly. So I would recommend that you have to be aware of that first. You have to learn which one it is, and then if it's an issue of yourself, then you can start understanding if it's maybe because you have some sort of imposter syndrome. Maybe you feel like that's how you learn how to work in university. You just did a lot of work at the end because you procrastinated everything until the end, or maybe it's just part of your personality. It's something that you can address with maybe counseling or any other form of help.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. So I hope it's okay to build on this idea because Shantae's question is so important. But this was a tough lesson for me when I was an engineer at Indeed. And I think coming out of academia and being like a good student and having to get perfect score, I had a manager really sit down and talk with me at Indeed, and it was a good he just said, okay, there's this quote, I think it's by Baudelaire, and it's like, don't let great be the enemy of good. The difference between software and this kind of academic get an A society is that like the software, there's no partial credit. You either release it or you don't to your customer. And so either the feature goes out or you stay and you make it perfect. And if the feature never goes out, you never have the business impact. You never get paid for your product. Like there's no partial credit here. So that can be hard because we want to do our best and have high quality, but there's a balance that needs to be struck so that you can release. And with modern, with software, not hardware, but software, where you can do easy iterations and we're no longer shipping in a box. Usually we're not doing tape out like the electrical engineers. You can iterate and do you can release the next day, you can do a patch the next release cycle, so you can gradually increase, and that will give you a better final product than trying to get the perfect thing and never launching. So, play to the strengths and know the game. And yeah, if your boss is pushing you too much towards perfectionism, you might consider whether you can, I don't know, set better expectations.
Set boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries or find it. I had my first I shouldn't say which. One of my bosses at a job that I do not have now was really on my case if I made any little mistake. And it was just so I switched jobs. Sometimes you have to decide or if you can, set boundaries somehow. Anyway, thanks for asking such a great question.
Well, thank you so much for the great advice, both of you. Yeah, so probably it's time for us to wrap it up. Thank you so much to all our amazing speakers for a very interesting and fruitful conversation. It was a pleasure and honor to have all of you. Thank you so much to our amazing audience as well, being actively participating, answering questions, asking questions, and also giving feedbacks. I am saving the chat because it contains a lot of useful links to the resources, and I will share it later as well in our meetup group, and also to the speakers if they would like to share it afterwards. It was nice to have you all, and I'm very happy that we started this conversation. I sincerely hope that we will continue this conversation about the importance of the mental health and well-being later in the future, and looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening for those of you based in Japan and this time zone. Have a good maybe afternoon and morning who are based in the different time zones. It was nice and pleasure to have you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.